Here are 3 things you can do to get the awakening process rolling now. If you're interested in spiritual awakening, or what I just call awakening, which is a fundamental shift or transformation at the level of identity, it's a transition from the false, suffering, enclosed sense of a self that is essentially made of a bunch of thoughts, beliefs, memories, perceptions, but just feels inherently uncomfortable. If you're interested in a shift from that to the experience of oceanic being, of a knowingness that goes beyond any thought object, then this video is for you. And I want to break it down into very simple steps. The reason that this is important at the outset to break it down into simple steps is that there is so much information out there. There's so much contradictory information out there. There's so much confusing information out there on awakening that it can be a kind of analysis paralysis, or not knowing where to start, or second guessing yourself and doubting your own ability to navigate this. It can make it so difficult at the beginning. So these steps are simple, practical, and most importantly, they work. I'm not just coming up with this. I'm not just pulling this out of my you-know-what. This information, these steps that I'm going to describe and break down into detail, come from years of exploration of this process with many people. And for me, this occurred over 20 years ago. But since then, I've gone through so many interactions with people and so many awakenings with other people that it became clear that there are certain steps, there are certain important keys that, if in place at the beginning, it will make the rest of the process go much smoother. So let's get going. Number 1 is admit to yourself, acknowledge within yourself, give yourself permission to hold this truth to be the center of what's important to you. And that is, awakening is the most important thing to you. Now, I don't recommend saying this to yourself unless you really mean it. But if you do mean it, or after sitting with it for a while, if you do genuinely feel that awakening, even if you don't completely know what it is, and you often won't, but is awakening the most important thing to you? Is it the most important thing you want to address in this lifetime, at least at this point? Then admit that to yourself, state it to yourself, maybe even write it down. But acknowledging that is far more powerful than people realize. Overlooking it, ignoring it, and sidestepping it won't necessarily prevent awakening. It can still happen, but they are distractions. And to set those distractions aside, see that we've been kind of sidestepping, dodging, walking around, and deciding not to do that anymore can be incredibly powerful. So step number 1 is acknowledging that this is your priority in life. This is the most important thing to you. This has implications beyond anything you can imagine in this moment. And unseen forces will come to your aid. It's amazing how life and the universe can rearrange itself when you really come into a deep communion with yourself, or a deep alignment with yourself. When you're congruent at the level of mind and heart and intention, then magic happens. Number 2 is, I find it important, if not critical, to engage some sort of teaching process that resonates with you. Now, this could be videos. There's tons of videos on YouTube now by non-duality facilitators or pointers, a Zen teacher, a Dzogchen teacher, ancient texts, the Pali Canon. There are so many sources of pointing, of good transmission. But I think it's important to start by asking yourself, does this deeply resonate with me? Does interacting with this process, with this doctrine, with this teacher, with this video, does it actually stir something deep within me, something undeniable, something beyond words, something beyond concepts? If it does, if it deeply resonates with you, or if this teacher or person or group or anything resonates with you in that way, where you can feel it. In fact, I might say you can feel it down deep where you acknowledged the orientation to awakening, where you acknowledge that awakening is the most important thing in your life. If it feels like that is where you're recognizing whatever teaching you're engaging or whatever book or video you're engaging, if you're recognizing it at that level, that this is something important, that something's stirring, something's moving down deep, then that's what I'm talking about. So number 2 is engage some sort of process, teacher, teaching, book, video, group that deeply moves you, that deeply resonates. It may even scare you to some degree, but it should, at least in part, touch into or begin to address that deepest yearning you have for awakening. And number 3 is a practical tip. Number 3 is something you can do right now. You can start right now. In fact, as we get closer to the end of this video, I'm going to point to exactly how you can do this. We can do it together, and I will explain the process. Number 3 is some form of inquiry. Inquiry meaning asking a question. Inquiry meaning becoming genuinely curious and then following your attention down to where that curiosity leads. It may not be down, it may be inward, it may be outward. But inquiry meaning turning that yearning you had when you made the commitment and the decision to turn toward this deepest instinct in you, to admit that awakening is the most important thing to you or acknowledge it. Turning toward that, turning toward the source of that yearning, the source of that acknowledgement. That's what inquiry is for, is to become curious about first what you are not, and then what you actually are, or what's really happening here. So some form of inquiry. We will go into a very specific type of inquiry called self-inquiry, which is a good approach to initial awakening. And we'll talk about that in detail. But first, I just want to say a few more things about this third step as a generality. One is, you have to be genuinely curious at some level. Now, you may be simultaneously curious and a little bit nervous or scared or doubtful. In fact, you probably will be doubtful. But there should be some curiosity. Like, what is this? What is beyond these words? Why, when I hear about awakening or enlightenment, I actually feel it really deep inside me, somewhere that's deeper than most of my experiences in life? Why is that? Right? That kind of curiosity is really helpful. What is it they're talking about when they talk about a shift in identity or finding out who I truly am or who I'm not? What does that mean? Why do I suffer? Why does this feel so uncomfortable, this life, even though there's nothing outwardly really that wrong going on? What is all this pointing to? What is it pointing me to? This kind of curiosity is really important with inquiry as I'm describing it. And next is, or the next aspect of this in this general inquiry approach I want to describe is, it's really helpful to have some sort of consistency with it. So if you just become a little curious and then totally forget about this for weeks or months on end, it's not quite as effective. Now, that could happen and it's fine. It's not going to prevent anything. But if you're really serious about this, then I recommend applying the inquiry, whatever inquiry process you decide on. And it may be the self-inquiry process we're going to talk about in a few minutes. But whatever it is, try to apply it consistently. That could be 10 minutes a day, could be 20 minutes a day, could be an hour a day, or it could just be throughout the day anytime you think about it. At some point, it will start to catch on fire where it feels so compelling that you will keep at it, maybe, several hours at a time. Whenever you think about it, you may not be able to do it constantly, but you may actually carry this with you through your day. Now, whether or not you do that doesn't matter that much, but I'm just pointing out that sometimes this gets so compelling that you may carry it well outside of your meditative practice, or however you're sort of sitting on your own to do this 20, 30, 40 minutes at a time. So number one, or point number one with this third point, which is inquiry, is curiosity. It's important to be curious when you're applying inquiry. And the second part is some consistency. Be deliberate about this. Put effort into it. Put consistent effort into it, even if it seems to come and go as far as how interested you are, or whether you even hit some fear barriers. Still keep going. Keep at it. That's what I recommend in general when you're approaching inquiry. Now, lastly, we're going to actually practice self-inquiry. We're going to investigate it right now. I'm going to give you a method that you can do right now, that you can apply in the immediate by listening to what I'm saying and applying it to yourself in this moment. And you can return to this as many times as you need to remember how to do this. So when we're going to start self-inquiry, it's helpful to be in a non-distracted environment. Put distractions away, put your phone away, turn the music off, sit silently in a space that doesn't have a lot of interruptions, no televisions, etc. And just take a few minutes to relax the body, move around a little bit, make sure that you're in a reasonably comfortable posture, nothing too strenuous, but also not too relaxed such that you're just going to fall asleep. So start with just relaxing the body a little bit, maybe move your attention around the body, see if there's any really tense areas that need to be sort of loosened up or just need a moment of attention. But generally speaking, just try to relax the body a bit. You may still have tension, you may still have discomfort in the body, and that's okay. But do what you can to relax it for a few minutes. And then begin. And the way we begin self-inquiry, in the way I'm going to describe it, is very simple. Just become aware of your thoughts. Notice any thought that's stirring in the mind right now. It can be a narrative thought, word thought, image thought. Often it's some kind of self-talk. So for instance, a thought may arise saying, I don't know what to do. These are common thoughts when we sit to meditate or apply inquiry type of practices or contemplative practices. We'll often have a kind of doubt thought that's wondering, am I doing this right? I don't know how to do this. So let's start with that. Let's say we notice a thought that says, I don't know how to do this, or I don't know what to do. If that happens, that's perfect. Nothing went wrong. That's the thought. Whatever the thought is, it's the right thought. Whatever the thought is, it's the perfect thing to notice right now. That's the whole point. And it actually has no bearing on this process what the content of the thought is. So again, we have a thought arising that says, I don't know what to do. So just notice that thought for a moment. I don't know what to do. What is it made of? What does it feel like to experience that thought? Does it sound like your voice? Does it sound like someone else's voice? Is it hard to tell exactly what it is made out of? But become curious about it. Don't run away from it. Don't start to multiply thoughts by analyzing. Just notice the thought. I don't know what to do. Now, as you notice this thought, you may notice the mind gets a bit quieter, or the space feels more still suddenly. You may notice you can't really find the thought, but you can kind of still look in the direction of it, wherever that might be. But keep your interest and attention on that thought as best you can. Now I want you to look at or consider, what is it that's aware of that thought? Who is it that's aware of that thought? In the same way that you're experiencing the thought as a movement of mind, let's say, can you notice the thinker, the one who's curious about it, which is you? Again, the mind may just stop, and that's okay. The mind may get very quiet. Or a thought may arise saying, I can't find it. Like thinking about the process. If that happens, just start again. I can't find that me. Or I don't know where to look. Another doubt thought. Start again. Just let that thought be there. The thought that says, I don't know where to look. Just notice it. Its texture, its feel. What it seems to be made of experientially, not conceptually. Where it seems to be. And now, see if you can't notice that which is aware of that thought, or that which the thought seems to refer to. If I don't know where to look, there's an assumption that there's an I there. Where's the I? How does it feel to experience that I? Just rest in it. It may feel like the center of where you are. Rest in that. And you can keep doing this. Again, if another doubt thought comes and says, I really don't understand this process. Start with that. There's a thought that says, I really don't understand this process. Isn't it curious that it's often a doubt that catches our attention? But you don't have to think about that. Just notice the thought. And now, see if you can't turn your attention back around to whatever it is that thought seems to be referring to. The I. Can you do that? Can the I turn around and look for itself? If not, why not? Remaining in the experience, see if that answer doesn't clarify itself. Now notice that as any of these thoughts that I've described, or your own thoughts, have come and gone, that I that we seem to be referring back to when we believe those thoughts, that I that's been looking at the thought, that I that's been looking back on itself or resting in itself, it hasn't changed. The thoughts have changed, the thoughts have come and gone. But whatever the most primary experience, considering all of this, considering the thoughts, considering itself, really hasn't changed. It doesn't come and go. It doesn't arise and depart. So it doesn't have a content of its own, and it doesn't need a content of its own to know itself. It knows itself through being. It knows itself through being what it already is, which is crystal clear. Requires nothing, requires no confirmation by thought. Don't label that. Just notice it. Notice it's already here. Couldn't not be here. It's already the thoughts. It's already that which is there before the thought, during the thought, after the thought. It's that which allows the thought to be known at all. It's that which the thought seems to be referring back to. It's that which is receiving this information. It's that which is unmoving, never has moved, never will. Doesn't come and go. Always there. There before the beginning of the universe. There after the end of the universe. There where there is no universe. ever present, but not in time, not in space. It's not limited to being at one point in time, not limited to be in one point in space. But you don't have to think about any of this, because if you did, those would be thoughts. Just use those thoughts to return back to the experience of the thinker, and then the thought and the thinker will drop away naturally. And there's just this ineffable something nothing, that which we can't talk about, but we could call it space, but there's no need to call it anything. We could call it intimacy, but there's no need to call it anything. We could call it infinity, but there's no need to call it anything. We could call it eternity, but there's no need to call it anything. It doesn't have a name. If something tries to name it, that's also it. The naming, the name, that which seems to attempt to apply the name, all of it is already this. Seamlessly this. Nothing has ever been apart. So this process of self-inquiry that I started with, noticing one thought and proceeding to this ineffable knowing of pure being, you can do this as many times as you want to until it becomes crystal clear that it's always this way. There's no entry or exit point. There's no process to arrive. You can follow these steps, follow this video, and let me know how it goes. Good luck.